Welcome to another episode of the Retirepreneur podcast. I'm your host with this week's executive summary for busy entrepreneurs building their second act business. Today's episode is designed for maximum impact in minimum time. Okay, let's unpack this. If I asked you right now to picture, the main demographic that's starting the most businesses in America today, you'd probably imagine a 22-year-old in a hoodie.
Right, in a Silicon Valley garage somewhere.
Exactly. Drinking energy drinks and coding all night.
Yeah.
But you would be completely wrong. The reality is actually absolutely staggering. The fastest growing demographic of new founders in the U.S. right now is people between the ages of 55 and 64.
Which is just a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. I mean, they now make up over 25% of all new entrepreneurs. That is a huge jump from just 15% back in 1996.
Wow, yeah.
And if you're sitting there listening to this executive briefing, wondering if there's actual money to be made here, or if this is just like some fleeting trend, consider this. The U.S. management consulting market alone hit $59 billion in 2024.
$59 billion. That's not a trend. That's a fundamental economic shift.
Right. We're talking about a major reallocation of expertise.
Yeah, and that context is critical because, well, we really need to completely reframe what we're actually discussing today. I mean, when people hear about someone starting a business after 55, the default assumption is usually that they're looking for a retirement hobby.
Oh, for sure. Like something to just pass the time.
Exactly. Keep busy, maybe make a few extra dollars to fund a golf trip or a vacation, but that is fundamentally incorrect. This is about leveraging decades of hard-won, highly specialized expertise to meet very real, very lucrative market demand.
Right. The data really backs that up, doesn't it?
It does. The Retirepreneur methodology highlights the psychological shift perfectly. They found that 75% of people who plan to work past the age of 65 are doing it to stay sharp, to stay engaged and relevant.
It's almost like a healthy aging strategy, just as much as an economic one.
Precisely. So whether your driver is an income gap where you want to bolster your nest egg or a purpose gap where you aren't ready to stop solving complex problems, you're stepping into a marketplace that is actively looking for the exact experience you already possess.
Exactly. I mean, the demand is unequivocally there, but, recognizing that demand and actually capitalizing on it are two entirely different things.
Oh, absolutely. Night and day.
So today, in this deep dive, we're answering the how. Like, how do you actually execute? We're distilling the core methodology from the Retirepreneur platform and its founder, Kurt Rose, to give you a highly actionable roadmap.
A roadmap for launching a lean, profitable second act business.
Yes. We're going to explore how to choose your delivery model, how to price for outcomes rather than hours, and finally, how to land that crucial first client without feeling like, a sleazy salesperson.
Which is the fear everyone has.
It really is.
Yeah.
So let's start with the very first step, which frankly is where I see almost everyone get completely derailed. A seasoned professional decides to step out on their own, and what is the very first thing they do?
They buy a domain name.
Right. They spend 3 weeks agonizing over a clever domain name, or they drop $5,000 having someone build them this beautiful 6-page website.
Which is wild.
I've been guilty of this exact impulse myself, honestly. It feels like you're building a business, but really, you're just playing business. You cannot build the infrastructure until you know exactly how your expertise is going to be delivered.
It's a classic trap, really. We gravitate toward the tangible things, logos, websites, business cards, because they feel productive.
It feels like checking a box.
Exactly, but it's entirely putting the cart before the horse. The Retirepreneur methodology makes it very clear. You have to define your delivery model before you build a single asset. And they break this down into 3 distinct models, which people often mistakenly treat as interchangeable.
Okay, let's walk through those.
Sure. So first, you have consulting. This is essentially doing the work. A client hires you to apply your direct judgment and execution to their specific, unique situation. You're highly involved in producing the final outcome.
So you're really in the trenches with them.
Exactly, you're in the trenches. Second, you have coaching. This is guiding the work. The client is the one actually executing the daily tasks, but you're providing the structured frameworks, the development path, and, the accountability to make sure they get to the finish line.
Got it. And the third?
The third is the course, cohort, or community model. This is scaling the work. You're packaging your knowledge into a curriculum or a system so it can be taught to many people simultaneously without your direct one-on-one involvement in every single client's outcome.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit, though.
Sure.
If I'm sitting here with, say, 25 years of experience as an operations executive, shouldn't I just go out there and say, hey, I'm a consultant, and just take whatever work comes my way to get the cash flow? I mean, revenue is revenue, right?
Yeah.
Why do I need to strictly categorize myself before I even have a client?
I hear that a lot, but taking whatever comes your way is exactly what creates massive friction and burnout from day one.
Really? How so?
Well, when you don't define the model, you end up customizing every single engagement. You're reinventing the wheel every time the phone rings, which just destroys your profitability and your sanity.
Ah, that makes sense.
Let's look at Kurt Rose's example of a chief financial officer with 25 years of cash flow management experience. That exact same expertise can be deployed across all three of those models we just discussed, but the resulting businesses look, operate, and market themselves in entirely different ways.
Okay, break that down for me.
So if that CFO chooses the consulting model, they might work directly with private equity portfolio companies to go in and physically restructure their debt. It's high-touch, highly custom work.
Right. Very hands-on.
Yes. But if they choose the coaching model, they might work one-on-one with a portfolio of small business owners, teaching them how to read and interpret their own financials. They aren't doing the accounting, they're teaching the owner how to be a better steward of their money.
Okay, that's a completely different daily workflow.
Exactly. And if they choose the course model, they might build a digital program teaching young entrepreneurs how to build a 13-week cash flow model on their own.
Wow.
The underlying expertise, knowing cash flow inside and out, is identical across all three. But the daily operation, the marketing strategy, the client acquisition cost, and the tools required to run those three businesses are entirely distinct.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
It honestly feels like trying to build a house without deciding if you're constructing a single-family home or a massive apartment complex.
That's a great analogy.
Right. I mean, the foundation has to match the structure. If you pour a foundation for a one-story house and then try to build a skyscraper on top of it, it's going to collapse.
Precisely. And that structural decision dictates your very first move. It changes completely depending on the model you select.
Okay, so what's the first move for consulting?
If you decide that consulting is your path, your immediate next step is to define one specific offer. Not a broad menu of 10 different services, but one specific problem you solve for one specific audience, resulting in one clear outcome.
Keep it narrow.
Very narrow. Once you have that, all you need is a scheduling tool and a simple proposal process. That 6-page website we talked about, it's just a distraction at this stage.
Okay, what about coaching?
If you're launching a coaching practice, your first move is building your session framework. Clients are hiring you for your process and your structure. You must know exactly what you're going to do in session 1, session 2, and session 3 before you ever take a discovery call. And you need a simple payment link ready to go.
And for the course or cohort model?
That mandate is entirely different. It's demand validation. You must pre-sell access to a waitlist or a founding group before you record a single module of video content.
Wait, really? Sell it before you build it?
Absolutely. What people will actually pull out their credit card to pay for tells you infinitely more than what they casually say they, might be interested in.
Oh, wow. That distinction right there could save someone 6 months of wasted effort recording videos in their basement that nobody actually wants to buy.
Exactly. It happens all the time.
But okay, let's say I've made the decision. I know exactly what I'm building and I know how I'm delivering it. Let's say I choose the consulting model. I skip the fancy website. I define my one offer.
Good.
I still have a massive glaring problem. I have received a bi-weekly paycheck direct deposited into my account for the last 30 years. My compensation was decided by an HR department and a salary band. How do I even begin to put a price tag on my own brain?
That is the big question.
Here's where it gets really interesting because we have to talk about shedding the salary mindset. When you spend decades as an employee, you are deeply conditioned to get paid for your time. You work 40 hours, you get paid for 40 hours.
Right.
But as an independent professional, you get paid for outcomes. And failing to make that mental shift leaves an incredible amount of money on the table, doesn't it?
It is undoubtedly the single biggest trap for second act builders. The psychology of transitioning from an employee to a business owner is incredibly jarring when it comes to pricing.
I can imagine.
Let's look at the numbers to ground this. Research shows that 39% of independent consultants charge somewhere between $100 and $250 an hour.
Which feels safe.
It does. It feels like a slightly inflated version of a corporate salary. However, professionals who have 15 or more years of domain expertise, which is exactly who we're talking to in this briefing, they regularly command between $175 and $325 an hour.
Okay, that's a big jump.
It is, but here's the critical data point we need to focus on. 51% of consultants who utilize value-based or project-based pricing consistently hit engagements of $10,000 or more.
Wow. Over 50%.
Yes, you simply cannot reach those numbers easily if you're just billing by the hour.
Why is that, though? Why is hourly billing such a ceiling?
Because your hours are finite, and more importantly, hourly billing actively invites clients to scrutinize your time rather than the value of the problem you're solving.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, if you tell a client you charge $200 an hour, they immediately start doing mental math. Well, if this takes 10 hours, that's $2,000. But if it takes 20 hours, that's $4,000. Can you do it in 8 hours? They're managing your time, not buying your solution.
I love the locksmith analogy for this. Have you heard that one?
I think so, but remind me.
So if you're locked out of your house in the freezing rain and a master locksmith shows up and picks the lock in 10 seconds, you weren't angry that he didn't take an hour.
Right.
You gladly pay him the $100. You're paying for the result. Getting inside your warm house, not the time it took him to twist the wrench. In fact, his speed and efficiency, which comes from decades of practice, is exactly why it's valuable. If you charged by the hour, you'd literally be penalizing yourself for being highly skilled.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. You are monetizing your accumulated efficiency. What's fascinating here is that the biggest barrier to premium value-based pricing isn't the market rejecting the price.
What is it then?
It's the professionals simply having never named a price before.
The fear of saying it out loud.
Exactly. When you've been insulated by a corporate salary, assigning a dollar value to your own expertise feels profoundly uncomfortable. Imposter syndrome screams at you, who am I to ask for $10,000?
Yeah, that's a huge emotional hurdle.
It is, but the Retirepreneur methodology offers a very logical way to bypass this. They advise building a pricing anchor from 3 specific inputs.
Okay, what are they?
First, your floor rate. This is the absolute minimum you need to cover your baseline financial needs and make the endeavor worthwhile.
Makes sense.
Second, the market rate. This is what your peers with similar experience are charging for similar work. And third, the value rate. This is the financial impact of the outcome you're delivering to the client.
Like how much money you're saving them.
Exactly. If your consulting project will save a company $100,000 a year in operational waste, charging them $15,000 is an incredible bargain for them.
Totally. It's a no-brainer.
Your ultimate price should sit somewhere between the market rate and that value rate. And I promise you, while naming that price the first time might make your palms sweat, it gets significantly easier after that very first conversation.
Okay, so we've established how to price the revenue side. Let's talk about the expense side. Because there is this pervasive myth that starting a business requires tens of thousands of dollars in startup capital.
Oh yeah, people think they need a huge loan.
Right. And honestly, coming from the corporate world, there's a reflex to just spend money to solve problems. In my old job, if we needed a new software tool, I just asked my boss and put it on the corporate card. It's terrifying to suddenly be the one funding everything out of pocket.
It's a huge shift in mentality.
But when you actually look at the data for this specific type of knowledge-based business, the startup costs are remarkably low. Research shows that a lean, one-person consulting or coaching launch typically only costs between $100 and $1,000.
It is incredibly lean, and that is absolutely by design. Overbuilding your technology stack is often just a sophisticated form of procrastination. It feels like work, but it isn't generating revenue.
Right. When you look at the required tech stack to get off the ground, it's almost entirely free tiers. You can use the free tier of Calendly for your scheduling. You can use the free tier of Zoom for those initial client discovery calls. You can use Wave for your early invoicing and accounting.
Yeah, you don't need much.
You absolutely do not need an expensive $200 a month all-in-one CRM platform on day one. I see people paying for HubSpot or Salesforce before they even have a single lead to put into it. Your technology should follow your revenue, not precede it.
That is a rule every second act builder should write on a Post-it note and stick to their monitor. Tech follows revenue.
Love that.
Now, with that lean sub $1,000 launch in mind, There are really only 4 non-negotiable legal and financial systems you must have in place before you accept that first client. These are the structural pillars that protect you.
Okay, let's list those out.
First, you need a separate business bank account. Do not, under any circumstances, mix your personal and business funds.
Oh, that sounds like a tax nightmare.
It creates an absolute nightmare for accounting. Plus, frankly, if a client writes a check to John Smith instead of Smith Consulting, it looks incredibly unprofessional. Get a dedicated checking account before a single dollar moves.
Okay, bank account is number 1.
Second, you need a basic invoicing process. Whether that's using software like Wave or QuickBooks, or even just a clean professional Google Doc template that you export as a PDF, you must be able to send a professional bill that clearly outlines how and when you get paid.
Right, keep it simple but professional.
Okay.
Bank account and invoices. What are the other 2?
The third is a written engagement letter. Do not rely on handshake deals and do not rely on casual email threads. You need a simple one-page document that explicitly defines the scope of the work, the timeline, the specific deliverables, and the payment terms.
This is to stop them from adding on extra work for free, right?
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this engagement letter is how you prevent scope creep before it even starts. When a client inevitably asks for just one more quick thing, you can gently point back to the engagement letter and say, I'd love to help with that. That falls outside our current scope, so let's draft an addendum for that additional work.
That is such a polite but firm way to handle it.
It works perfectly. And the fourth non-negotiable is a basic plan for quarterly estimated taxes. When you're an employee, your company handles withholding your taxes. As a self-employed professional, you are entirely responsible for making those quarterly payments to the IRS.
Right.
So setting aside 25 to 30% of every single payment you receive into a separate savings account is an absolute must. If you don't, tax season will completely destroy your cash flow.
Yeah, nobody wants that surprise in April. What about an LLC, though? Don't you need to form one right away?
A quick note on legal structure, because this always comes up. Forming an LLC, a limited liability company, is a great idea for liability protection and tax flexibility down the road. But it is not strictly required to take your very first client.
Really?
Really. You can absolutely operate as a sole proprietor for client number 1 while you evaluate your long-term needs and get the revenue flowing.
That is incredibly freeing. You don't need a lawyer on retainer on day 1.
Not at all.
Okay, so let's summarize where we are. You've defined your model. You've built a pricing strategy based on value, not hours. You have your lean financial systems and your bank account ready to go. You're officially open for business.
Exciting part.
Now comes the million-dollar question. Sometimes, literally. How do you actually get someone to write you a check?
Yeah, client acquisition.
Right. So what does this all mean for marketing? I'm going to be completely honest here. The idea of tapping my warm network feels incredibly gross to me.
It's a very common feeling.
I just have this visceral fear of being that guy, spamming former colleagues on LinkedIn, begging for work, or making awkward phone calls to people I haven't spoken to in 5 years. Am I supposed to start cold messaging hundreds of strangers?
I completely understand that fear. The image of the desperate, pushy salesman is what keeps so many brilliant professionals from ever launching. But the answer to your question is absolutely not. You do not need to spam anyone, and you certainly don't need to rely on cold outreach.
Oh, thank goodness.
In fact, the data on this is definitive. Cold outreach is arguably the least effective way for a second act builder to land their first client. You just don't have the brand awareness or the marketing budget to make cold traffic work early on.
That makes sense. No one knows who you are yet.
Exactly. According to the research, more than 50% of first consulting clients come directly from former colleagues or existing professional networks. And if you broaden that out just slightly, roughly 60% of first clients originate from warm referrals.
Wow, 60%.
Yes, the people who already know the quality of your work, your former bosses, your direct reports who have moved on to other companies, vendors you worked closely with, past clients, they are your immediate, highly qualified pipeline.
Okay, I hear the statistics. But how do we operationalize that without feeling sleazy? Because just knowing you have a network in your LinkedIn connections isn't the same as generating revenue from it. I need a process that doesn't ruin my reputation.
And this is where the Retirepreneur methodology really shines. Kurt Rose has developed a highly specific 4-step execution sequence for exactly this scenario. It is brilliant in its simplicity, and more importantly, it completely removes the awkwardness and the social pressure.
Okay, lay it on me. What's step 1?
Step 1, Write down a list of 10 to 15 people who have seen your expertise firsthand, people who know your work ethic and your capability.
So not just random connections, but people who can actually vouch for you.
Exactly, quality over quantity. Now, step 2, reach out to them. But here is the critical psychological shift. You reach out to inform, not to sell. You are absolutely not pitching them your services.
Wait, you don't ask them for work?
Not at all. Your message should be something along the lines of, "Hi, Sarah. I wanted to share a quick update. I'm now taking on a limited number of consulting clients specifically focused on solving insert your specific problem. I just wanted to let you know what I'm up to in case you happen to hear of anyone who fits that description."
Oh, wow. That framing is so important. It completely removes the pressure from the interaction. You aren't cornering them and asking them to hire you. You're treating them as an ally.
Exactly. You are lowering their social risk to 0, which leads perfectly into step 3. Ask for one name, not their business.
One name.
Just one. In that same conversation, you simply ask, "Do you happen to know anyone who might be dealing with this specific operational bottleneck right now?"
That's so low pressure.
It is. Think about the math here. If you reach out to 15 people and you get just one name from each of them, you suddenly have a completely full, highly qualified pipeline of 15 warm leads.
That's brilliant.
And finally, step 4. When a name does surface and your contact introduces you, you do not send them a massive unsolicited proposal. You follow up with a very specific, narrow, ask a 20-minute discovery call simply to understand their situation and see if you are even a fit.
So you're just interviewing them, basically.
Yes. This raises an important question. Why is this specific sequence so effective? It works beautifully because it relies entirely on trust that has already been established over your decades-long career.
Right.
You aren't asking your network to take a massive risk on an unknown entity. You are simply asking them to point you toward a problem they already know, for a fact, that you are uniquely capable of solving.
It really is about reducing friction at every single touch point. You aren't selling, you're diagnosing. You're offering a solution to a pain point that someone in your extended network is actively suffering from.
Perfectly said.
When you look at all this together, choosing the right structural model instead of jumping to website design, pricing for the outcome instead of the hour, and tapping into that warm network with a zero-pressure strategy, launching a second-act business stops feeling like this insurmountable mountain.
It becomes incredibly achievable.
It really comes down to replacing assumptions with execution. You don't need to have all the answers mapped out for the next 5 years. You just need to answer the immediate next question well enough to get moving.
And that is the true beauty of the lean launch. You earn your infrastructure. You let your first dollar of revenue dictate your next technological or operational need. You lean heavily on your 30 years of accumulated experience, not on a fancy website or a complex marketing funnel. The value is in your head, and this methodology simply gives you the framework to extract it and monetize it safely.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. Whether you're finishing up your walk, your workout, or your commute, think deeply about your career. What is the one problem you've solved so effortlessly for the last 20 years that you assume everyone else finds it easy too?
Oh, that's a great question.
We all have that one thing. We think, oh, surely everyone knows how to optimize the supply chain, or everyone knows how to manage a crisis communication plan. But they don't, because the very thing you take for granted is exactly what your future clients are out there right now actively willing to pay a premium for.
Absolutely true.
That's your executive briefing for this week. If you found value in these insights, share this episode with fellow retirepreneurs and subscribe to the Retirepreneur newsletter at retirepreneur.com. Follow us for weekly strategic insights, and remember, your most successful chapter is just beginning. Until next week, keep building.